So I'm Keith Pearson, one of the managers of the Veteran Outreach Program, Mentorship Program, and you can see Daniel Luigi here. You want to introduce yourself, Daniel? You're on mute.
There you go. Sorry, I was fiddling with my audio devices. Yeah, one of the other mentors of the Veteran Outreach Program. I work for Norfolk Southern. It's good to meet you, Brandon, and everyone that's on call.
Yep.
And just to introduce our guest speaker today, Brandon Fowler. He's works for Citizens Insurance, and you've been in the seat, from what I understand, just over a year now. Is that
Mhm.
right?
That's correct.
Um,
Yep.
but you transferred over from the Navy after 20 years of service, and you're a submariner. I'll let you go ahead and take the floor from here.
Yeah. No. Definitely. Happy to be here. And I always look forward to these kind of opportunities to help reach back. I know that when I was going through the process of transitioning out of the military as well. It's super helpful to have all of you guys part of that as well, and listening to you guys speak out. And so when presented the opportunity to kind of provide that same feedback and same mentoring ability, certainly jumped on it right away. So. But as Keith said, I'm Brandon Fowler. I was in the Navy for 20 years, specifically kind of in that submarine realm. So I did 20 years in, submarine operations, planning, pretty much all over the place. I was in, you know, at sea just about everywhere you can go in the world. And then, in shore tours, I spent some time overseas and 4.5 years specifically in Naples, Italy, where we traveled around a lot and, interfaced with a lot of like foreign countries. And you'd be surprised. That's actually, quite the feather in your hat if you've ever had opportunity to interact with like foreign nations and NATO and things like that. People definitely look at that as a huge collaboration advantage if you've had to like reach out across difficult lines like that and make things happen. So they definitely see that as a plus. Um, but yeah, so while doing that, like I said, I primarily managed, submarine operations, dealt with the risk, getting submarines from point A to point B with no windows and, doing all that good stuff and transitioning out. I kind of stumbled into the CBCP course. A buddy was just like, hey, um, I did this course and it was super interesting and, I'd never really even kind of, heard of that realm, right, that industry before. And, I was like, oh, let me look into it and read into it. And, kind of linked up with, Alan Lake. If you haven't met him before and you're on this call, I'd be surprised. You should definitely leverage him, as, as a way to, kind of get your foot in the door and make sure you're on the right path, and he'll keep you honest too. But yeah, so I reached out to him and he gave me some good intel and he got me in one of those classes, and that's where you know I met Daniel in there because he came in and spoke on that class in the Jacksonville class in what was that, December of 24, I believe. Yeah. So, but yeah, there's tons of great information. Um, I'm not sure how many of the audience here has their CBCP or is working towards it, but I assume most. So yeah, if you want to keep going in that, this realm in this industry, it's, leverage this community. This community is great. Everybody's looking forward to opportunities to help people succeed. So, definitely take advantage of that. As Keith also mentioned, post-military career, I've been with Citizens Property Insurance Corporation for about a year, a little over a year now. So, uh, short goes by CPIC, and then that's just kind of a list of like kind of all the things that we do. Sometimes business continuity can be spread out a little bit. Sometimes you have the crisis management side. Sometimes you have the DR disaster recovery side. Sometimes you have the business continuity side, the vendor side. We're lucky here to kind of do all of that. So I can kind of answer questions across that realm if you want. We have a small group, small team here that kind of handles all of it. So any questions that come up in any of those specific domains, I'm pretty equipped to handle those questions as well. But again, yeah, these are kind of just the basic functions, what we do, right? Develop, implement, optimize BCDR frameworks, plan, manage, and facilitate annual business impact analysis, lead exercises, tabletops, collaboration with, the risk departments, et cetera, consulting with other business partners, whether that's, vendor teams or, things like that, technology technology teams to make sure that we understand what's going on and what the objectives are. And then testing, training, and exercising, right? So that's a huge part of it. But yeah, that said, any questions about me or my background or current state? I'm assuming everybody can hear me.
Yeah, I just one thing with your transition, what were some of the challenges that you faced, and how did you overcome them?
Oh geez, yeah, that's a great question. I think my first slide will kind of jump into that. So if there's no additional kind of questions with my background, that is, we'll jump right into that. Does anybody have anything? Feel free. This is like I think when Daniel came on for our call, it was kind of the similar kind of layout and objective here. Is I'm casting kind of a wide net here. Want some interaction. If there's any questions, certainly reach out. If not, hopefully everybody grabbed my email and contact information over there. You can always
Yep.
feel free to reach out in that way as well. So
Hey, anytime anyone has any questions, just throw it in the chat, and then I'll prompt you when we have a pause, and we can answer those.
mhm. Yeah, and I also have my chat open here as well. So yeah, it's good to see there's a pretty wide spread here. So we have people all the way from coast to coast here, a lot of Georgia, Florida, California. So it's pretty good widespread. All right, so yeah, since there's no initial questions, we'll jump in. So this first slide, kind of going into Keith's point, is what are some obstacles that can make transition difficult, right? So the first one that I always come across, and you've probably heard this, and everybody's probably heard this already, is just translating your military experience. So the blurb I put here is just, veterans struggle to translate their military experience. I mean, we've all heard that. How do you get around that? What are some questions you have in getting around that? So a lot of that is, again, I'll go back to use a network like this. Right. So my resume is going into this and trying to hunt in this industry for jobs initially. I just went. I think I'm a resourceful person. I think I'm good at writing. I just dove in and just wrote my own. And I guess one kind of stray here is everybody's going to have a different perspective on your resume. So take it with a grain of salt. Take the advice. Move forward. But leverage these networks to help translate that military experience. So somebody said, I don't see any slides on the shared screen. Is that everybody or is that just Jimmy? Same. I see the slides.
Let me see.
So it seems like half are seeing it.
I wonder if you stop displaying and pop it back up, it'll trigger on everyone.
Yeah, let's give it a shot. Stop sharing. Let's see. I think I lucked into sharing it the first time, so we'll see how this goes. It's kind of a new system here, so yeah, let's look here. Share again. How's that look?
I got it now.
Yep. Randy says he's good. Yep. Jimmy says they're up.
All right, perfect.
All right.
We'll turn it off and turn it back on again.
Yeah, there you
all
go.
cylinders
Step one. All right. Yeah, so just to kind of jump back into that, but yeah, so common things, the acronyms, the how do you translate the, the terminology, things like that. A lot of that comes with like knowing the industry, like right, before you were in your special military fields, like you didn't understand, that language as well. You couldn't have walked into that environment and spoke that language. So really, it's just like Alan harped on. It's just learning to speak Greek, right? So you just have to learn, that language, understand that language, and then make sure that you translate what you've actually done into that language. So what's Lucian said? No. So basically the question is, was 20 plus years with a single employee perception that you were too senior and inflexible? No. So the 20 plus years, just I guess it could be looked at in a various different ways, but it's never been brought up as far as that to most employers. And when I look at resumes for people coming in here, you look at that as, somebody that has, continuity in doing the thing, right? So they understand it, they've built experience, they've built a wealth of knowledge, they understand how to be loyal to an organization, things like that. So I don't think I've ever heard of it being a negative. Um, I don't know, any thoughts, Keith, Daniel?
I think if you're worried about showing too senior of a role, I might not show the full 20. Like I might just show the last 5 years experience, and then I'll tailor that down to the role. Maybe do a one-page resume if I'm trying to get into a junior level position. But I think if you have 20 years, you should really be shooting for that mid-level or senior level position anyways.
Right.
I wouldn't short sell yourself.
Yeah, and I think that if you serve 20 years in the military, your roles are going to most likely change. And if you can delineate between those roles that you grew as an individual, I think that's worth highlighting. But transitioning to different roles, showing multiple capabilities, whether that was specific to risk management, emergency management, or more on the business continuity side. I think that showing that diversification in your resume, speaks volumes. So I don't see anything wrong with, serving your country for 20 years under the same
Right.
employer, whether that be Coast Guard, Marines, Army, Air Force, so on.
Yeah, and I think that's how mine's broke out too. Is I have the listed as 20 plus years of military experience, and then broke down into individual roles. But also one thing I do see that's I think a common flaw is when you're applying for maybe that interim role or that specialist role, and your previous job experience in the military says that you were the director of business continuity. So that could be off-putting, right? That may set you up to look too senior for the position, right? So that's a common one that I see a lot. Yeah, I'm just trying to keep up with the chat a little bit here too, but yeah, so we'll just move on just for sake of time. Lack of civilian certifications, and like Keith and Daniel, if you don't mind just keeping up with that chat a little bit as well, and then if you see any questions in there, I'll try to keep a look at it too. But
Yeah, sure, no problem.
so yeah, lack of civilian certifications. So we'll go into this a little bit more in the next coming slides, but just make sure when you're looking at those job postings and you're getting the relevant civilian certifications to bolster your military training, right? So if you're going to an IT community, you may have worked with IT systems and things like that, and somehow maybe you didn't get the right any of those certifications while you're active duty. Make sure that you get the certifications to validate that experience. Same thing with the CBCP, right? You did it for a long time, get the certification to validate it for that civilian job. Cultural differences. So yeah, I mean, I'm not going to harp on that one too long, but that's just really adjusting to the different workplace environment and the different type of life, right? When you're in the military, the hierarchy and the structure is what it is, right? I even had like one of our first in-office meetings here. I show up and I walk and I sit on the right side of the table, and everybody else walks in and just grabs a seat and sits down. I'm just like, oh yeah, we don't have to wait for like the senior person to like come and sit at the head of the table and then say, yeah, everybody be seated, right? so yeah, that's not really a thing anymore. The hierarchy it's a little different. You still respect the people in higher positions of power, but I've never had a problem with reaching out to any chief or VP or anything like that, and just shooting them an email and getting a response back. So it's not like go through their aid and draft a quad slide just to get an answer in a month. And first names are fine, absolutely. Yeah, yep. Transition stress, that goes without saying. It's an extremely stressful process. And again, I can't harp enough, just leverage like networks like this to help ease that, just to help double check you. I have one mentee right now, and I try to write them at least once a week, if not more. Like, hey, what are you working on? Oh, I'm working on these 2 resumes. Like, all right, we'll send them over. Like, send me over the job descriptions, send me over the resumes. Let me take a look and just see what I think. Having been in the seat for a while and understanding what all that terminology means. Make sure you're not putting foot in mouth. Saying that you're doing something that doesn't make sense. But yeah, so that's a big thing. I can't harp on that enough. And then, just resume and job search challenges. I'll go into that more in kind of future slides, but these are kind of the big ones that, common themes that always pop out when it comes to obstacles and transitioning is just that, translating the experience, lack of civilian certifications to match what you actually did and the value you bring, cultural differences, transition stress, and resume and job search challenges. And then the last kind of bullet there, I think, is very important. And Alan harped on me a lot on this because, I'm a PMP holder. Like, I value that PMP. That was, it was difficult to get, a lot of energy and time invested to get it. But when you're in this field and you're trying to be in this industry, the PMP comes after your CBCP. It builds on your CBCP. It shows
Absolutely
your
correct.
ability to manage the program, and it shows that you can handle large projects, because it is what we do is, basically a program manager job, and you're managing a lot of small projects all at once and making sure they all come together. So that PMP enhances and strengthens, your business continuity experience.
Yeah, and I think that with that, I like to think of like your PMP as kind of like your college degree. Some people don't really care that what college you attended or what your field of study was, is that you
Hmm.
just got a degree, right? Because what that shows is you have the ability to do critical thinking. It shows that you have the ability to see things through to a finish. Now, where that is, you're absolutely correct, is that you don't want to put too many letters behind your name and confuse people. I mean, I'm very intentional, and to Alan's point, he always uses the term, don't force gain the regulator, like don't put too much stuff in there. But I'll say the caveat to that is be very intentional. And so for me, I was looking at the common denominator across the industry was data protection. So that's why I sought out AWS certification, because I am like, I need to understand
Hmm.
how are we, failing over, and what are we doing in the cloud. So if I can speak to that, then I can certainly have a good foundation with my business continuity. It's not the end all be all, but it certainly is a large portion of my current job. And so, back to Brandon's point, is the PMP is more foundational, but leverage that CBCP first. And then, you don't want to bloat your resume with, agile and, this movement and
Yeah.
Kaiban and all that stuff. We want to keep those business continuity terms. So I digress.
Yeah, and odds are you may probably will join an organization that's, using some form of, PMP methodology, or, project management methodology. And I mean, we use, agile here as well. So we go through those same steps with our, daily stand-ups. And I mean, not as robust, I think, as most, but we still use that terminology. So it is useful. But yeah, so let's just jump on to the next slide. This slide basically is, kind of summed up in, in your career search, in your, sorry. Okay. Yeah. So in your career search, and, throughout, this transition, just be specific, be deliberate, and be purposeful, right? So
Now,
kind of the key.
Randy
Go ahead.
had a quick question saying, does the same apply for your LinkedIn profile on what we just spoke to?
Yes.
Thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, I think so. I mean, I didn't initially. So when, I first, was talking with Alan and went through the course and all that stuff, he will hop on your LinkedIn profile, and, he'll talk trash to you if it looks wrong. But yeah, he told me, he's like, you're not there. So to go on to the credentialing, I guess that's more so what you're talking about. No, list everything you got, right? Just make sure you adjust your credentials to be of importance, right? So a lot of times I'll hop on people's profiles, and you'll see they have like a Google, like 14 series Google project management cert, and then you go to like four pages into their certifications, and they're like, oh, they have a CBCP and a PMP, and all these important certifications that you don't see unless you dig, right? So just make sure you move those to the top, right? And you can do
I
that in
would
LinkedIn.
I would say though, make sure you're putting relevant stuff on it, like the
Yeah,
LinkedIn stuff. Look at what's going to add value for you, because
yeah,
if you're looking at PMP, CBCP, ITIL, any of the core things you would see on an application, yeah, make sure you have them in there. But if you're communicating something that's not BC, you're not being a practitioner, you're
hmm,
being jack of all trades, and you might want to either hide that or maybe remove it. So some things are valuable, but some things might not add value, and it's just not worth having it on there.
Yeah, because it shows, I think on LinkedIn, like it shows like your first 3 on your splash page or something. So if you're proud of them and you did them and you want to keep them on there, I don't see any harm in it. But to Daniel's point, don't let them be the first thing people see, right? Make sure that CBCP is the first thing they see, and then if you have your PMP and so on and so forth, any IT certifications that for specific roles that you're going into. So yeah, make the important stuff stand out.
And I think that it's a slippery slope that, again, with your, you're saying be deliberate. I say also be intentional. It's like if you're branding yourself as a PMP, that's what people will think you are.
Yeah.
If you're branding yourself as a BC, you know, be BC, but you can't be all things to all people. So I'd say, provide that 90% BC and sprinkle on that PMP, but don't just say, oh, and every post that you put on is about PMP, because people are like, oh, well, this guy's not a
Mhm.
BC, he's a PMP. So be very intentional with that. That's all I got on that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
branding is important. Like if you're branding yourself otherwise, future employers might think that you're not interested in that role, like that maybe you love crisis management, so you're not going to be happy in a BC role, so they don't want to come after you. They want you to be happy in your role.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. So again, it's just similar to resumes. You'll find different perspectives, but I agree with all that. Just make sure that like Alan harped on me, and like I probably still got a lot of work I could do to my LinkedIn account, but I haven't really kept up with it in the past, like, I don't know, 8 months. But yeah, I could probably go on there and do a lot of adjustments as well to brand better. But yeah, most things, anything I see from the DRI or the VOP groups, like I'm always resharing those and clicking those and making sure those stay at the forefront. And if you're not on, that kind of goes to this first bullet here. If you're not in those communities and LinkedIn, those provide like a ton of value. Even in job search, like I know. Um, actually, Daniel posts a lot of jobs on there, for that he sees and forwards out and things like that. I see a lot coming from the group, and they may not fit your location, but some will, maybe it will. So don't stray away from being involved in those different communities. The DRI, this group, right? ACP, BCI, DRJ. Like there's just a ton of them out there. Get involved in those chapters, and ours here in Northeast Florida is not great. It's kind of dying. So we're trying to, here in our office, we're trying to help pick it back up, but we'll see how that goes. Yeah. So the other thing is kind of, both the second and third bullet there are kind of, with researching what you want, right? So research what you want and make sure that you're prepared. So what that means is, go look through just like a slew of different BC type jobs. Like I said, there's all different varieties. Alan was like, hey, just search CBCP and see what pops up. That works. You'll definitely see a lot of jobs that pop up that desire the CBCP. But then there's so many different other varieties, and it kind of depends on what you want. You might get a job like me where you kind of dabble in all of them. Or there might just be a crisis management specific, might be BC specific, might be ITDR specific. It could go in a lot of different ways, but just do your homework. Go find a few of each. If you need help, feel free to reach out. But find a few of each. Read what they're looking for. Do your research, and then once you tailor your resumes to get into that job interview, make sure that you're doing your research for your interview too. Prior to interviews, you're going to get emails, with invites and who's on the interview. Nothing says you can't go look at their LinkedIn page, look at their history, look at their background, look at, what they did, throughout their career, where they're from, know a little bit about them, right? And then when you go in there and do your interview, maybe create a personal connection, in there somewhere. Maybe you were both from Kansas, or you're both, like have the same, sports team or something like that. But kind of create some of that personal connection as well. And then additionally, just know what's going on with the company, right? So research, what's happening with that company. Do they have any major initiatives? Were they in the news? Try to avoid, if it's bad, I would say try to avoid, bringing up bad things, from the company in the news, if it's a place you want to go. But just understand what's going on with them. I mean, for this job specifically, when I came in, I was able to spout off, how many employees they had, what locations they were at, what, were they, as far as, international organization or just local or, state run. Like, I understood the backbone of the company. What do we got here? Okay. Yeah. Sorry, you're on mute, Keith.
Yep. Sorry. Yeah. Just Lewis just adding to that PMP or the PMP piece that we were just talking
Yeah.
about.
Yep. Yeah. So just the more you know about them, it shows you're invested, right? So that's a big part of it. And doing your research shows that you're invested. So don't just show up. Make sure that you have some background knowledge and that you've taken some time and put some energy into it. It goes a long way. To the next point is the leverage technology. Like I said, spoiler alert, like everybody's doing it, right? So make sure you're leveraging AI, resume scanners, LinkedIn networking. So I put LinkedIn networking on here because my current role, kind of funny story here. But I was in the middle of interviewing with FIS and I saw this role pop up and I was like, oh, that looks like a perfect fit. So what I did, or let me back up. So when I first started entering the job market, I scattered out, just found a bunch of different jobs that I was interested in. I shot off like 55 resumes in a month, right? I was tailoring them. They were okay, nothing special, but I was just firing them out. It's like, how many hits do you think I got on those? 0, right? So maybe a screening call, like maybe, not many. Then, I talked to somebody and they're like, hey, go into your network. Like, you have this giant network of people called like the military that are all in open positions just like this. Like, go search for the company that you want. So you see a job posting, say it's with Citizens, go search by past employers in for Citizens, and it'll you can put Navy, you can put Army, like whatever you want, like check all those boxes, and it'll pull up all the people at that company that previously were, Navy, Army, whatever you select. And then look at that list of people. Ideally, you find somebody in like maybe a director role or something like that. Just reach out to them on LinkedIn. I never had a single one of those people not write me back. For this role specifically, I wrote a guy that worked here and I said, hey, I saw this job posting, this is my name, this is where I'm at, this is what I'm doing, like all these, kind of a brief intro, and I'd like to, sit down and talk with you about it, maybe, get an internal referral from you, so on and so forth. And then, he actually was on vacation. I didn't know that, but he didn't write back. And I just got itchy. I was like, oh, I just want to submit this resume. So I submitted the application. Within like 6 minutes, I got like an email back saying, hey, we appreciate you applying, but you're not a great fit for this job. It's like, okay, I've gotten about 56 of those to this point, so it's okay. I'm not taking it to heart anymore. but anyway, so Monday rolls around. He reaches out and he's like, oh yeah, I'd love to help you. He's like, send me over your resume. And I was like, all right, here you go. He's like, oh, well, it says you already applied. I was like, I know, you guys said I wasn't a good fit. And he's like, oh, 1 sec. And then he writes me back and he's like, well, I just sent it to the hiring manager and she said you're exactly what they're looking for. And I was like, oh. And they're like, oh, well, resubmit it. We're going to send you an internal referral. Resubmit it. And then I resubmitted it. By the end of that week, I had an offer, right? So I did one interview. By the end of that week, I had an offer. So leverage a network. It's
Yeah,
a big
I can't express how powerful that is.
Yeah.
Keith, it reminds me of the USA thing with you, right? Submit a resume out, and then the company you're applying to isn't even the company that's screening you. It's some consultant agency. So they were just like, next slide. But if you got that inside connection, that's really powerful. So that's good.
Yeah, no, it's huge. And then just to kind of go further on with what's that most likely resume of missing keywords. So I mean, I pulled it through. That's the irony, is I pulled it through the scanner, submitted it to him. It was a 98% match, and then when they rescanned it, it was a 98% match. So
Yep.
it just
Well,
didn't make it through the pile. Right?
One thing is, You have a lot of companies, they have quotas. They need 10 fully qualified candidates. The hiring manager can't screen through 50 candidates. They're going to get 10. Here you go. These are fully qualified. So basically, you got to skip the line. That's
Hmm.
that benefit. If you see 100 resumes already applied to a job, start reaching out to your internal contacts. If you're 0 resumes to it, drop it and see where it happens. But you got to be first in the spot.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
Brandon just keyed in on it. I mean, this is really good material. I have to foot stomp on how important this is because, like you said, you could send out 50 resumes and get nothing back, or maybe you'll get the email that says no, we moved on with somebody else. But that's just not having the right eyes to tell you yes, right? And so I've done this in my previous job search before I got picked up with Bank United. Is I was looking at Citibank and I wanted to know more about them. I was just curious about the company, and so I found somebody who had gone through Alan's class that got hired, and I just said, "Hey, can you walk me through what a day in a life looks like for a BC practitioner at Citibank?" And they're like, "Yeah, let's jump on a call." And they're like, "Hey, can I see your resume?" And then they're like, "Yeah." And then within a day, I got like an interview. And it just so happened that I had an offer letter already on my table that I was ready to sign. And it was just that I had already had a yes at the time, and so I
Hmm.
went ahead and went with Bank United. However, I had just pushed my resume all the way to the top of the stack where I might have not even got a fair shake. So I
Yeah.
mean that really resonates with me.
Yep. Yep. Same thing. Yeah. It was interesting. I was like, oh, yeah. Well, I guess it is who you know, right? Um, yeah, and then the last kind of on that technology bullet, just kind of an interesting story. So I have a neighbor who teaches, I think it's like seventh or eighth grade, and it's for the gifted students in the school. And we were out maybe a month ago, and our kids were playing, and I was just kind of talking with her, and she just starts talking about how AI and it's going too far, and the kids and this, that, and other thing. And actually, I was like, well, I mean, it's in the workforce. And she's like, what do you mean? And I was like, oh, everybody's using it. I was like, these are gifted students. Yeah, at a minimum, these gifted students, like, we should be teaching them how to leverage AI ethically in order to be, successful in the industry, because this is where the world is going. Like, you can't slow that down, right? And she's like, well, they're cheating. They're using it for this, that, and other thing. And I was like, well, teach them the ethical use, right? Somebody, I can't remember his name, but it was at the DRJ conference. He mentioned, using AI like an exoskeleton, right? He's like, don't teach your employees, right, to put on that exoskeleton, right? Because that employee might only be able to lift, 40 pounds, on just a standard lift, but you put that exoskeleton on him, now he can lift 3,000 pounds, right? So it's leveraging AI ethically to do work, and to get work done efficiently, right? We have a lot, especially in this BC world. There's a lot going on. I use AI all the time. You just have to. Like, there's no point in sitting at your desk hand jamming out a document for 5 hours when you can jump on ChatGPT and say, hey, can you build me a framework based on the DRI, principles, or whatever the case is, or NIST, or whatever. Just, can you build me this framework and like the major talking points, and it spits something out in 10 seconds, and then there you go. Now you have an 80% solution. You go through, verify it, make sure it's right. Add all your specific. Oh yeah, and that's another thing. You have to be careful if your company doesn't support AI within the organizational framework. Don't put like company specific, uh, I guess, sensitive information into that system, right? Make sure that you're getting generic and then you're updating it separately. Anyways, but yeah, there's no need to start from scratch. Like, there's, like I said, with AI coming about, make sure you're leveraging it to get the best product you can as efficiently as you can. So, okay, that's kind of the last point on that. I just thought it was funny that it's kind of, remember when, like, the statement, remember when calculators were not allowed in school, right? So that always irritated me. It's like, oh, you can't use a calculator. It's like, but why? In the real world, I'm going to use a calculator. Like, I'm not going to do all this math like in my brain. I'm going to use the calculator. Okay. Yeah. And then this kind of, the last point kind of just builds on to that, networking and using LinkedIn and using your professional references to, help you get referrals. So I kind of already talked about the story about how I gained internal referrals from priors I'd never met before. So getting this job, I gained just by going on LinkedIn and searching, past employers and, found an in. I was in the middle of interviews with other companies at the same time that I got this job. So FIS, same thing. Any of those big companies, they're going to have people that served prior and are going to be willing to help you. Like I said, I've never written, like I probably did it 15 or 20 times, and it was generally within the same day I got a response back. Um, you know, willing to help. This is what you need to do. In most cases they just send you a link because also spoiler alert, like if you get that internal referral and you use their name and you get hired, they're probably going to get some kind of bonus. so they're wanting to help you that way as well. But yeah, and then just kind of some stats that I pulled up here from various sites, but just says that referred candidates are about 4 times more likely to be hired by companies than those without a referral. And then overall referral employees have 28.5% chance of being hired, while non-referred employees have only a 2.7% chance. Like that's because you're just not getting out of the stack most times. Candidates referred by a director level. That's why I mentioned that earlier. If you can find somebody that's director level or above, gets you up to that 91% chance. So 53% chance if you're referred lower than that. But yeah, you can see how those kind of all stack on top of each other. Any questions or comments here on this slide? Oh. Yep, doesn't see anything, so we'll just move on. Okay, yeah, so this is, I think Keith asked me to talk about this, but this is mostly more so to be kind of an eye-opener at the beginning. So, 7:30 at work, we have our 8:45 daily stand-up, 12 o'clock lunch, and then 1600 head home, right? That's it. Mostly it's because my day has to be flexible. I spend a bunch of time, especially being in the insurance industry in Florida, hurricane season is all year long, because if you're not doing hurricane, prep or hurricane season or hurricane aftermath, like it's just all year long. So we're always flexible, always jumping on calls with every different, division, department within the organization, trying to, help the best way we can and strengthen those continuity plans. And then test all the their technical equipment, make sure everything's got good solutions. So it's just all day long. And your calendar, you could enter a week with nothing on your calendar Monday through Friday, and by the end of Monday morning you're going to be joining everything. It's just going to fill up. If you're running a good program. Because if you're running a good program, you've solicited it enough to where people understand that you're there to help. You're there to strengthen their processes and make sure that they're, not susceptible to outages and things like that. And so you just want to make sure they understand that. When I first got here, there wasn't that. It was more so like people were scared. Like anytime I set up a meeting, like, hey, we need to, do the BA on this thing, and they're just like, oh no, like they kind of wanted to withhold information, like they thought you were trying to like out to get them. It was super strange, but over the course of a year, we've definitely changed that around, and everybody's super willing and joins in and takes advantage really of what we have to offer. So we want to help, and that's the key. You got to make sure that you have that buy-in, all the way up and down, and I generally start at the top and, I explain what I'm doing, to the leadership teams and make sure that they understand, and then kind of push that down. And once everybody sees that everybody's bought in, you get great input. And I generally start most of my emails with, hey, this is some heavy lifting, but I'm gonna spread the load, right? I'm gonna carry just as much as you do, and we're gonna get this thing to the finish line. And then, as long as you're attaching dates and, objectives and, what you need to get done, it's just like the military, right? If you give just empty orders, nothing's going to happen. But if, you attach, the outcome that you're desired, right? The objectives you're trying to achieve and when you need to get it done by, people respond way better to that. So, But yeah, and then just really, like I said, stay flexible. Make sure that you're invested in everything, and you're trying to learn as much as you can. I will tell you, jumping into a role like this, especially, in a team that most of the people on the team had been with the company for like 10 plus years. It's kind of drinking from a fire hose, learning all these systems, right? When you were in the military, wherever you're at, you understood those systems, you drank those systems for, 20 years or so, or however many years. So they were second nature. So that's why, not to ramble too much about it, but it's important to just dive in and sit in as many of those meetings as you can, request to join as many as you can, and just be a fly on the wall. And then eventually you learn enough to be dangerous. And then at the top here at the 7:30 at work, so I put remote, hybrid, and on-site here, and I highlighted it because I think it's kind of important, at least for me, to talk about. And I was talking with Keith a little bit earlier, and before everybody jumped on about it. And the reason why I highlighted it is because I know when I was getting out, I was a little like wishy-washy about remote or hybrid roles. I really wanted an in-office role, and so I was kind of like limiting my scope to really just looking for in-office. And when I hired on with Citizens, we were actually like fully remote. They were, since COVID, they shifted to remote, and they stayed remote, and then they went eventually, about 3 months after being here, we went back to a like slow return to office kind of program, and then we were just kind of doing hybrid. So like half the days, we'd work from home, half the days we would, work from, the office. So that was nice. And then we fully integrated and returned back to office. I think what was about 2 months ago. And there's pros and cons to all of them. Like I was mentioning to Keith earlier, like if I picked, probably the perfect one for me would be hybrid, just because you get that at home time, but then you also get that maybe mine was Monday and Friday. You get that Monday and Friday time at home. You can kind of take care of some stuff on your lunch break. You don't have a commute to add to your day, so there's a little bit more you can get done on your personal life. And then that Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday you're in office, you get some a little better collaboration, a little better camaraderie with the teams, so on and so forth. So I would just say the reason I highlighted that is don't be deterred, from remote. It's sometimes people don't want to do it because it's just new and different, but those remote and hybrid roles have just as much value, if not more. Some people might say more, but that's kind of my 2 cents on that part of it. Any thoughts from you guys?
I prefer remote myself. I work a hybrid. And I gotta drive out to Atlanta so mine's like a 3 hour, but mostly remote. And I think when you mentioned about like getting stuff done, for me, remote, you really get so much more done when you don't have that commute. There is a bit of gap. Like when I was working with some of my managers, there's kind of this anxiety. I don't know what's going on. They're not talking to me. I don't see them on a day-to-day basis. Am I doing good? Am I doing bad? Is this guy jumping in my meeting to shadow me, or are they just seeing what's going on? So there's a bit of that comes with the remote. Understand the environment, and if you're shooting something over a text, you might have to throw a smiley face there or something that you might not normally do because the emotions don't carry well over text. So that's some of the kind of things that you have to consider in that remote environment. It's a different way of communicating. It takes some adjustment, but it is beneficial, and there's a lot of value in it.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, there's pros and cons to both, and I mean, really, it's just how you want your work-life balance to be. But mostly, I wouldn't stray away from any of the three. So don't limit your searches, and just understand that they all have different pros and cons. So
Yeah, I would say also understand who you are as a person. Understand, are you is it going to benefit you really to work remotely? And you have to be honest with yourself. You're like, am I the type of person that needs that regiment to be in an office and have that structure, or am I like Daniel that loves the autonomy to get stuff done? And instead of having those water cooler conversations, maybe I can tackle something that would take me 10 hours in a couple hours. So if you're not the type of person that can do that with autonomy, then maybe you should be on site. So I mean, things to think about, but I wouldn't say deter your job hunting from only just looking at remote. I know a lot of people love that autonomy, but in some cases you can kind of get your foot in the door and say, look, if I'm willing to give you 3 months on site and show you that I can do this job, and that we can kind of tailor this back to something that can benefit myself and my family, would you be willing to entertain hybrid? You'll find that in a lot of cases, people are going to go ahead and do that
Mhm.
if they can see a return on their investment. So that's all I have for, to add to that.
Yeah, and we have kind of the same thing here. There's the AWA program, so you can do alternate work arrangements. And like I said, we're full in office, but I mean, like yesterday, I worked from home because my son has a kindergarten graduation, which is a thing. Yeah, so he had a kindergarten graduation. It's a big deal. It was a Hawaii theme. So, but yeah, I just work from home for that because by the time I commute and then back and forth, like you lose half a day of work, and so everybody understands. Next week I'm doing the same thing, 1 day remote, and then the following week I'm working 2 days remote. So we're full in office, but I mean, people don't abuse it, and we work from home when we need to. So, all right, we'll jump on because I have a couple slides here. These are really just kind of to pop out, and if there's any questions, like I said, for any of the like interviewing tips or anything like that, feel free, please reach out. I know with my current mentee, he generally after he goes through an interview, he'll reach out and say, "Hey, this is how I answered this question. What do you think about it?" And I'll just give him honest feedback of, "Hey, if I was hiring manager, I would have not liked this point or that point, or you could have tied this back together this way better, and so on and so forth." So if there's any questions with that stuff, like I said, feel free to reach out, shoot me an email, and I'm sure any of these guys are the same way. But yeah, so I just put a couple samples on here. Really, the example one is, you'll hear this pretty much on any BC related kind of job interview. But really, what is a business impact analysis? What are the different factors that go into it? And like, can you relate that to your personal experience? Kind of that some shape of that question. And I really just kind of boil it down to like these 6 things here. So you have executive sponsorship, understanding the organization, data collection, impact and assessment, RTO and RPO, and reporting and documentation. So if you look at all 6 of these things, you should be able to take each one of these 6 things and tie that to like your military experience. If that's all you have going into it is the military experience, you can easily tie all of this to that, right? So just pick one, executive sponsorship. So securing support from top management to ensure the BI process is prioritized and receives the necessary resources. That's easy, right? So who in their military career didn't have to go to their senior leadership in the military and get buy-in and ensure that they got the resources they needed, right? So some shape, some way, some capacity, like you did that in your career, and it's just telling the story to make sure that it's like communicated well. The hardest ones probably are like number 5, right? So like with my mentee, recovery time objectives and recovery point objectives. First, understand what they are. So do some research. Like if you have your CBCP, you probably already know. But do your research, understand what they are and what they actually mean. Draw the line diagram, make sure you know which one's which, and you can talk intelligently about how it applies, to the organization from that aspect. But really, that's just establishing the maximum acceptable downtime and data loss for each critical function. So how those are a little harder to relate to your military experience, depending on what you did. So if you did if you dealt with a lot of risk situations, which pretty much everybody did, find one of those risk situations, look at what went into determining like your risk evaluation, risk assessment of that situation, and then break it down that way, right? Because in everything we did, there was technology involved. In everything we did, there was a critical process involved, right? So just understanding how that critical process translates to a mission objective, and then that that RTO, right? That technology recovery translates to whatever that technology was that you relied on to get it done, whether that's an inertial navigation system on a ship or, whatever the case is, right? So just being able to tie that together. And again, if you have questions on how to do that, just say, hey, like I did this thing. How can I translate that to like a RTO, RPO, like, experience, right? So
As John saying, it's been fun
Yeah.
educating the different parts of of our org on the RTO, RPO, and MTD, and how to relate business functions with tech systems.
Yep. And that's a big part of it also is the training aspect. I do training every day, right? That's a big part of this job is, before I go out and, meet with the department or division or assign them a task or, hey, this is what we need from you guys. Like I'll set up a 30-minute phone call and train about what that phase is and what that means to their continuity plan or their DR plan or whatever the case is. So training is huge. That's something not a lot of people I've found are very good at in the civilian world is being able to, talk and present. So if you've got that skill, that goes a long way. But yeah, so again, any of these 6 things, right? You should be able to tie to it. And if you can't, reach out. We'll certainly help you. I know I will definitely help you. I'm sure these guys will help you as well. Yeah, and then getting down in here, it's the same imposter syndrome thing, right? Just get rid of that. I know my mentee had said it to me 100 times. Like I just feel like I have this imposter syndrome. It's like, well, stop. Like you don't, right? And then explain to me why. And then he tells me the question or the situation he was in, and I'm like, all right, link that to this thing, and then I give him an example, and he's like, oh, well, yeah, I've done that. It's like, all right, well then just shake it off, find something relevant, make a list, find something relevant to like what that is, and then build on it, right? There's no imposter syndrome. Like we as like military, prior served military, are more qualified to sit in these seats than anybody, right? That's just the way it is. Like we've done this. Like we know how to handle crisis. Like we know how to plan. We know how to handle risk. We know how to develop like all these kind of all this documentation. We know how to do it. Like we are more qualified than anybody to sit in these roles.
And Lou says, if anyone is familiar with CCIR, PIRs,
Mm-hmm.
FFIRs, NIAs, TAIs,
Mm-hmm.
decisive decision points, they're easy to tie in with the RTO, RPO, and MTD.
Yeah, fact. Yep. And then I like to I just kind of put this slide on here as kind of almost just a quick shot across the bow because this one is it. Once I like connected these dots, it was like the second interview I did. I was like, this is so dumb. Like, how did I struggle to answer this question, right? So, can you explain how you manage the business continuity program lifecycle, right? The easiest question to answer. Once I was like, oh, geez, there's 10 steps, right? These all look familiar to anybody with a CBCP or the professional practices. Yeah, so these 10, right? Program management, risk evaluation, and control. When I did the interview for this job, they asked me this question, and I literally just said, well, first, I focus on the program management, initiating and managing the business continuity program, and then I go into the risk and evaluation and control phase, and like basically just take the professional practices and just walk the dog. And they were like, wow, that's amazing. So those are professional practices for a reason. So yeah, just make sure that you leverage those and you understand them. They're super intuitive to exactly what you're trying to accomplish in these roles. So understand those and make those a part of like how you answer your interview questions. But yeah, that's pretty much the long and short of it is that was kind of like an eye opener for me when I the first time I answered that question I was like kind of fumbling around of like, oh well, I would make sure I check and see what the company's like weak points are and then try to come up with plans. And it's like, well, there's already a list. Like if you just understand this list 1 through 10 here and you just commit those to memory, and then just answer that question, the flow of that list, you will 100% ace that question.
Yeah, just rinse and repeat after that.
Yeah.
That's a life cycle.
Yep. But yeah, so I guess we took it up to 4 minutes till. So let's give a couple minutes for questions then. I know.
Yeah, so far, really great content, Brandon. I really appreciate you jumping on here. From your lens and your perspective, like, did you think you were going to be touching as many things as you were in Citizens, or was that just kind of the job discovery? Or I know with a lot of businesses, the higher the larger the organization, you start to become siloed, and you do that one process, and that's the only thing you do. Can you speak to that a little bit versus where you're at in Citizens?
Yeah, no. So when I first came on, I thought it was solely kind of the business continuity, job, right? So technically fall under. So it's kind of a weird situation, but we're like enterprise resiliency, which is how they kind of blanketed us. Not enterprise risk or enterprise resiliency, which covers like the business continuity, crisis management, and also the vendor side plus the ITDR side. So we kind of hit all that across that, and I didn't really know that going in. I didn't know the enterprise resilience meant that it was a blanket of all those things. I just assumed it was a business continuity role. But I did have like a decent kind of IT background and some basic certs in IT, so that was helpful. But I guess just understanding that full circle of like what that role is. But hopefully whoever you interview with will you can ask those questions and make sure you understand the scope if the job description's not fully explaining of that.
And John asked, do you see value for veterans or opening others with DRI, such as the Zero Trust or cyber resilience?
As far as like certifications,
Can we expand on that a little bit, John?
yeah, if it's related to certifications, I just did the CRMP and I'm going to do the CCRP in a month. If it goes with certifications, yeah, I'm trying to pretty much knock out all of the DRI certs. Yeah, I mean, I see value in it. I don't know that those are at this point are as highly sought after as like the CBCP or like MBCP, but I'm sure they will come around. So
Yeah, and I think you could also play to your strengths and weaknesses. Like if you see something that's in your Achilles heel that you don't know much about, me personally, I tend to gravitate to that so that I can strengthen up my weakness. But in other cases, some people may see like I saw, a common denominator across the industry was that, data protection. So I gravitated towards, AWS. You could gravitate to Azure, cloud operations. Some people are now starting to take in like AI stuff. What I'll say about that is be very careful about that. You're not delving into a different industry. If we can keep it high level of understanding with like your CBCP, it blankets everything. But if you start to get down into like Python coding and all that stuff, you're starting to get into the tactical elements of other people's jobs. And so what I'll caution you about that is be knowledgeable enough to be dangerous, but don't be knowledgeable about being the
right,
subject matter expert. And if you're the subject matter expert in, in the cyber domain, you may find out that you started off in a CBC or a business continuity job, but now you're in IT and siloed in there. So anyway,
yeah,
that's my
and
piece.
depending on the company you go to, like you may be in the IT division. We're actually fall under OGC because Citizens is technically like a state run, governed, I guess. So it's like a government entity kind of when we want to be. But yeah, so it's different. So we actually fall under that, the Office of General Counsel, and then our department is IT security, risk, and resiliency. So that's why I was like, well, I'll do that, the CRMP, which is the risk side as well, and then I'll do the CCRP, which is the cyber side as well, and then kind of touch, every aspect of what our department says we're responsible for. So, but yeah, again, so that's kind of to Keith's point is, figure out kind of where your hierarchy is of that, department or division that you're in, and what certifications will best suit it.
All right, excellent. Well, we're at the top of the hour. Great presentation, Brandon. We really appreciate you. And to our audience, thank you everyone for logging in and taking your lunch hour to go over this. I hope this is really good information, and that you'll help leverage this to land your next career at BC.
Yeah, of course. And yeah, thanks again. I appreciate the opportunity. And like I said, if anybody wants to reach out, feel free, find me on LinkedIn or, email me, whatever the case is. But yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to talk.
All right, likewise. Thanks, everyone.